Sarah stood frozen at the entrance of the restaurant, her hand still clutching the door handle. The dim light of the chandelier above her illuminated the scene before her, but it couldn't cut through the growing darkness that threatened to engulf her. It was supposed to be just a quiet evening, a break from the endless shuffle of work, family, and the gnawing sense that something in her marriage was slipping away. Yet here she was, witnessing the very moment that would change everything. Her heart thudded against her chest as she stared across the room. There, sitting at a corner table by the window, was Jack, her husband of 15 years, his face lit up by the soft glow of candlelight. He was laughing, a carefree, easy laugh that she hadn't heard in months. But what made her freeze in place wasn't the sound of his laugh. It was the woman sitting across from him. Emily. Sarah didn't need to ask the question. She had known. Somewhere deep inside her, she had always suspected. The late nights, the evasive answers, the sudden trips out of town. Jack had always been a good husband, or at least she had believed him to be. But the cracks had started showing. And now, standing in the doorway of this upscale restaurant, Sarah's worst fear was staring her in the face. Emily, a young woman with an air of elegance about her, leaned in to say something. Jack smiled, his hand reaching across the table to gently touch hers. The sight was like a punch to Sarah's gut. What do you do when you realize the person you trusted most in the world, your partner, your best friend, has betrayed you? Do you confront them in that moment, or do you let the weight of it all sink in first? Sarah wasn't sure. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let this slide without doing something about it. The worst part? Jack didn't even see her. His eyes were locked on Emily, his attention fully captivated by the woman who wasn't his wife. Sarah's hand tightened around the door handle, the cool metal biting into her palm, as if it might hold her steady. Would you like to join them? The voice came from behind her, making Sarah jump. She turned to see the maitre d', a middle-aged man with a thick accent, standing there, his expression neutral. He was offering her an opportunity to enter the restaurant, to make herself known. But Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready for that. No, she managed to say, her voice cracking slightly. I'm just waiting for someone. The maitre d' nodded politely and moved away, leaving Sarah standing in the shadows, watching the scene unfold. Her mind raced. How had it come to this? How had she missed the signs? Or maybe, more honestly, how had she chosen to ignore them? It was easier to believe that everything was fine, that Jack would never hurt her, that they were just going through a rough patch. But now, seeing them together, so open, so unbothered, it hit her like a ton of bricks. The dinner invitation she had received from Jack earlier that day now felt like a cruel joke. He had asked her to join him, to celebrate their anniversary. And yet, here he was, sitting across from Emily, making memories that didn't include Sarah. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. She needed to leave, to run far away from this moment and never look back. But her legs refused to move. The anger was bubbling inside her, a slow, steady burn that threatened to overtake her composure. That's when the idea struck her. What would she do? Confront him? Call him out in front of Emily and let the chaos consume them all? Or would she play it smarter, hold her cards close, and wait for the perfect moment to strike? She glanced over her shoulder at the maitre d', then back at Jack and Emily. They were still laughing, oblivious to the storm that was brewing just a few feet away. Sarah swallowed hard, then made her decision. What would you do if you found out your husband was cheating on you? Sarah's mind echoed the question, her heart racing with a mixture of hurt and something else. Anger? Resentment? Maybe both. But what if there was another way? What if the answer wasn't to explode in front of him, to let the raw emotions spill out and destroy everything in one sweeping moment? What if, instead, she could show him what it felt like to be the one on the outside looking in? What if she could make him feel the exact same way she did right now? With that thought, Sarah reached for her phone. It wasn't like she was just going to let this slide. No. She wasn't a passive observer in her own life. If Jack thought he could get away with this, he was sorely mistaken. She quickly typed a message to her best friend, Lauren. "You won't believe what's happening right now. Jack is here, having dinner with her. Emily, his mistress. I'm not going to let him get away with this. I have an idea." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The plan began to take shape in her mind. She knew exactly what she had to do. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? On her. She could feel the tide of emotions shifting, pulling her in all directions. What was she really after? Revenge? Closure? Or something deeper, something more meaningful? She wasn't sure. But one thing was certain. Jack had just made a huge mistake. And now, it was time for Sarah to make him pay on her terms. The thought of showing up at that dinner table, standing next to Emily and Jack, was strangely empowering. It wasn't just about making him uncomfortable. It was about reclaiming her power, her sense of self. It was about showing him that she wasn't the same woman she was when they first met. No, this time, things would be different. Sarah closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. There was no turning back now. The following morning, Sarah sat in her car outside her house, staring at the front door as though it might hold the answers to everything. Her mind raced, her fingers tapping restlessly on the steering wheel. She had hardly slept the night before, her thoughts a constant whirl of emotions and plans, each one more complicated than the last. But no matter how many scenarios she ran through, one thing remained clear. She was done. Done with pretending everything was fine. Done with allowing Jack to take her for granted. "How did we get here?" she whispered aloud to herself, though the question didn't expect an answer. The answer was already in her heart, buried deep under layers of confusion and betrayal. Jack had changed. Or maybe Sarah had changed. She wasn't sure anymore. As she pulled her phone from her bag, she reread the message she'd sent to Lauren the night before. "You won't believe what's happening right now. Jack is here, having dinner with her. Emily, his mistress. I'm not going to let him get away with this. I have an idea." Lauren had responded immediately. "Oh my God. Are you okay? You have to tell him. But if you're not ready, I get it. Just let me know if you need anything. And please keep me posted." The support from Lauren had been a comfort, though the idea of confronting Jack still made Sarah's stomach turn. She had always been the one to manage the emotional labor of their relationship. She was the one who kept the house together, who handled the kids, who made sure everything ran smoothly. Jack was the charming, successful partner who could sweep her off her feet when he wanted to, but who now seemed to have lost the ability, or the will, to see her as more than just a background character in his life. Jack had never been perfect, but their marriage hadn't been filled with red flags. Sure, they had their share of misunderstandings and the occasional argument, but Sarah had always believed that love could overcome any challenge. That was until the realization hit her that love wasn't enough to fight against lies and deceit. As Sarah opened the front door and stepped inside, the familiar warmth of home greeted her, but the sound of the kids playing in the living room made the house feel more like a museum of her past life. She stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting the sounds of her children wash over her, grounding her. She knew that whatever she decided to do, it would impact not only her marriage, but their family. She could no longer afford to ignore the reality of her situation. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. It was Jack, his briefcase in hand, his suit still crisp from the office. He smiled at her as he entered the living room, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hey," he said casually. "How was your day?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, weighing her options. She could act like everything was normal, like the night before hadn't happened, or she could take the plunge. "How was your day?" she asked instead, her voice steady, even though her insides were in turmoil. Jack frowned, setting his briefcase on the sofa. "You okay? You seem a little off." "I'm fine," Sarah replied quickly, her tone sharp. She wasn't sure what she was trying to protect herself from, his concern, his dismissiveness, or the flood of emotions that were threatening to spill out. "I just wanted to ask you something." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Sure. What's up?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Where were you last night, Jack?" The question hung in the air between them, as though the words themselves had the power to shatter the fragile reality they had built. Jack froze for a split second, and in that moment, Sarah saw it. The flash of guilt in his eyes, barely visible but enough to make her heart drop. He had been caught in the act, and yet he was trying to play it off like it was nothing. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice too casual, the hint of a nervous chuckle in his tone. "I was at work all day and then I went to that business dinner. You know about it." Sarah felt her anger begin to bubble up, but she kept her voice low, controlled. "Really? Because I went to that restaurant last night. And I saw you. I saw you with Emily." Jack's face went pale, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he let out a shaky breath. "Sarah, listen. It's not what you think." "Oh!" Sarah's voice was cold. "Then explain it to me, Jack." "Explain why I saw you sitting there, laughing with her, touching her hand. Explain how you couldn't even be bothered to make me feel like I mattered anymore." Jack stepped forward, reaching for her hand. But Sarah pulled back, the space between them growing wider. "Sarah, No," she interrupted him, her voice firm now. "No more excuses. I've had enough." Jack's face was a mixture of confusion and guilt, but he didn't speak. He knew there was no way out of this. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of clarity. The fog of doubt had lifted, and she could see things for what they truly were. This wasn't about a one-time mistake. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. This was about betrayal. Her heart clenched at the thought of it, but she refused to let herself break down. "Not yet. So, what are you going to do now?" Jack finally asked, his voice almost pleading. Sarah looked at him, her eyes cold and distant. "I'm done, Jack. Done with the lies. Done with pretending. But I'm not done with you yet." His expression faltered, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'm going to handle this my way," she continued, her tone sharp, calculated. "And you'll learn what it feels like to be on the other side." Jack didn't respond. He just stood there, his eyes wide with realization, as Sarah turned and walked out of the room. She didn't need to say anything more. The next few days felt like they were suspended in time. Sarah moved through the motions, getting the kids ready for school, managing the house, pretending to smile when Jack was around, but her mind never stopped. Every moment was consumed by the scene at the restaurant, the look on Jack's face when she confronted him. He hadn't fought back, hadn't even tried to justify his actions. The silence had been louder than anything he could have said. Sarah couldn't stop replaying that moment in her head, over and over again. She had caught him. He couldn't deny it. But more than that, she had taken control of the situation for the first time in years. The feeling of power was almost intoxicating, and it made her think of the possibilities. She wasn't just going to sit back and accept this betrayal. She would make him see what it felt like to lose everything. But even as she planned her next steps, the weight of it all bore down on her. She had always been the fixer, the one who kept things together, who kept the peace. Now, the thought of dismantling everything, the life they had built, the family they had raised, felt overwhelming. Could she really go through with this? She didn't have time to sit and question herself for too long. That evening, after dinner, Jack came into the living room, looking uncomfortable as he sat across from her on the couch. He hadn't brought up the confrontation from earlier in the week, and neither had Sarah. It was as if they had both agreed to pretend it hadn't happened, but the tension was suffocating. Jack had sent a few apologetic texts, but his words felt empty. She could see right through him. I think we need to talk, Jack finally said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Yeah. About what happened? About everything? She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she studied him, looking at the man she had married all those years ago. His handsome face, his charming smile, it all seemed so distant now. His expression was pleading, but it was too late for apologies. Too late for explanations. She took a deep breath, then spoke, her voice cold. Jack, you've already said enough. You don't need to talk to me about it. You need to talk to her. His eyes widened, and his face flushed. What? Sarah, no. I'm not an idiot, Jack, she cut in sharply. I've known about Emily for months now. Don't think you can just talk your way out of this. Jack flinched as if the words themselves were a slap across the face. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration and guilt boiling over. It's not what you think, okay? It's complicated. Complicated? Sarah repeated, her voice rising with incredulity. What's complicated about betraying me, Jack? What's complicated about lying, sneaking around behind my back? He opened his mouth to respond, but the words seemed to die on his lips. He was lost, unsure of how to fix this. But Sarah had already made her decision. She wasn't looking for closure anymore. She wasn't waiting for an apology. Look, she said, her tone turning icy, I don't need you to explain yourself. I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you and Emily. This is about our family. About our kids. I'm not going to let you ruin everything just because you can't keep it in your pants. Jack's face contorted with guilt and frustration. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. I swear You already did, she interrupted, standing up. You already hurt me. And now it's my turn. For a moment, the room was silent. Sarah could hear the beat of her own heart in her chest, the adrenaline pumping through her veins. She could feel the weight of the decisions she was about to make, the path she was about to take. But the one thing she knew for certain was that she couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. Jack stood up too, his hands raised in defeat. Sarah, please, just hear me out. No, Jack, she said, her voice resolute. I've heard enough. I'm done. She turned toward the door, and Jack reached out for her arm, but she shook him off, stepping away. His face twisted with shock and pain, but there was no pity in Sarah's eyes. There was only a fire. She was going to do this on her terms. What would you do if you found out your husband was cheating on you? The question still haunted her, but now Sarah had an answer. She would make him feel what she felt. She would show him the consequences of his actions, not just for the sake of revenge, but because she needed to reclaim her power, her voice. The next morning, after the kids had left for school, Sarah found herself sitting in front of her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keys. It was time to put her plan into motion. She had already contacted Emily, using a new email address to reach out. The message had been straightforward. I know what's going on. I think we should talk. Sarah wasn't expecting a warm response, but she was certain it would be enough to get Emily's attention. She had never been one to back down, and now she was going to take control of the narrative. Emily was about to find out that Sarah was no longer the woman who would cry herself to sleep, who would ignore the signs of betrayal. No, she was someone new now. Someone stronger. Her fingers typed the next message with determination. I'd like to meet. Maybe we can have coffee. Talk about what's been happening behind our backs. I think it's time for both of us to know where we stand. Sarah hit send. The rest of the day passed slowly as she waited for a response. She kept herself busy, tidying up around the house, organizing the kids' rooms, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that was threatening to pull her under. But she wasn't going to let that happen. Just before sunset, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was Emily. Let's meet. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. same place. I'm sure we have a lot to discuss. Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and dread wash over her. This was it. The moment she had been building toward. She wasn't sure what Emily would say, or what might come of it, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let Jack, or anyone, decide her fate anymore. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the meeting, Sarah woke up with a sense of urgency that made her feel alive, in control, and yet, strangely disconnected. The air outside felt heavier today, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. She glanced at the clock, just after 9 a.m., and felt the weight of time pressing down on her. There was no turning back now. She took a long shower, trying to steady herself, her mind buzzing with all the possible ways this meeting could go. The feeling of her own heartbeat against her ribs was a reminder that she was no longer the woman who silently suffered in the corner of her marriage. No. She was someone different now, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, no matter the cost. She dressed quickly, nothing too fancy, but enough to look confident and self-assured. A dark blue blouse, tailored jeans, and simple but elegant flats. She didn't need to dress for Jack's approval or for Emily's, but for herself. It was important to her that she felt strong, grounded in her own skin. Her phone buzzed as she was finishing her makeup. The message came in from Lauren. "Are you sure about this? Don't do anything you'll regret." Sarah stared at the message for a moment, biting her lip. Lauren was her best friend, but even she couldn't truly understand the fire that had been lit inside her. She couldn't understand the years of quiet frustration, the slow erosion of trust. She had to do this for herself. "I'm sure," Sarah replied, hitting send before she had time to second-guess herself. At 10:45 a.m., she left her house, locking the door behind her. She didn't look back. She drove to the cafe where the meeting with Emily was set to take place. It was a small, quiet spot in the center of town, intimate enough for privacy, but public enough that neither of them could easily escape. Sarah arrived a few minutes early, her heart pounding, her stomach in knots. She parked her car and sat for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She wasn't sure what she was expecting from Emily. Anger? Regret? Denial? She didn't know if Emily was going to be the kind of person who would apologize, or the kind who would turn everything around and blame Sarah for Jack's betrayal. Either way, Sarah was ready. When the clock struck 11 a.m., Sarah took a deep breath and walked into the cafe. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for the woman who had unknowingly become her rival. And then she saw her. Emily was sitting at a corner table, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her posture relaxed and open. She looked younger than Sarah had expected, more naive, even. She was wearing a simple black dress and sipping on a latte, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Sarah walked over to the table, her steps measured. When Emily looked up and saw her, her face froze for a moment, then morphed into a forced smile. "Sarah," Emily said, standing up and extending a hand. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually show up." Sarah didn't take her hand. Instead, she sat down across from Emily, locking eyes with her. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries," Sarah said, her voice steady but sharp. "You know why I'm here." Emily's smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. She sat back down, folding her hands on the table. "I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear the truth, but if you're ready for it, I'm here." "Don't worry about me, Emily," Sarah replied. "I've already heard enough. Now it's your turn. You owe me an explanation." For the first time, Emily looked unsure, her gaze darting around the cafe as if looking for an escape. But Sarah wasn't about to let her off that easy. "I don't know what you want me to say," Emily said quietly, her voice tinged with something Sarah couldn't quite place. "It wasn't supposed to happen. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Sarah scoffed. "Of course it wasn't. But it did, didn't it? And you're sitting here like this is just some innocent little mistake. Do you even know what you've done to my family?" Emily flinched at the question, but quickly composed herself. I'm sorry for what happened, really. I didn't mean for it to hurt anyone. I thought it was just a fling. I never thought I'd get so involved. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. A fling. That's how you justify it? Do you even understand the consequences? You've torn apart a family, and you sit here talking about it like it's some little thing. I didn't know, Emily said, her voice suddenly breaking. I didn't know Jack was married. He told me he was getting divorced. He lied to me. Sarah blinked, her thoughts momentarily derailing. He told you he was getting divorced? She repeated, her voice colder now. Emily nodded, her eyes wide with guilt. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I really didn't, but I'm not the one who lied. Jack is the one who deceived us both. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Sarah. It was hard to reconcile the hurt she felt with the unexpected vulnerability in Emily's voice. Part of her wanted to lash out, to blame this woman who had unknowingly walked into her life and taken everything from her. But another part of her, a small part, felt a flicker of empathy. Emily looked down at her hands, her voice quieter now. I never meant for it to get out of hand. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. You didn't mean to? Sarah's voice was sharp again. Well, guess what, Emily? You did. And now we're all paying the price. They sat in silence for a moment. The cafe's soft chatter filled the background, but Sarah's world had become painfully still. Emily seemed genuinely remorseful, and for a brief second, Sarah wondered if this conversation would go in a completely different direction. But that wasn't what Sarah needed. She didn't need apologies. She didn't need Emily to fix what Jack had broken. What Sarah needed was for Jack to see what he had done. And Emily, in this moment, was just a part of the larger picture. Finally, Sarah broke the silence. I think we've both said enough for today. Emily nodded, her eyes still filled with regret. I didn't want any of this, Sarah. But if you ever need to talk, I'm here. Sarah stood up, her resolve hardening once again. No, I don't need to talk to you. I need to make sure that Jack understands that he can't get away with this. As she walked away from the table, she didn't feel any satisfaction, any sense of closure. But she did feel a small sense of relief. She had taken the first step, and there was no going back now. The meeting with Emily hadn't been as satisfying as Sarah had hoped. There was no catharsis, no moment of clarity where everything fell into place. Instead, she felt like she had just kicked over a hornet's nest, and now the buzzing and chaos of it all was swirling around her, threatening to consume her. The next few days were a blur of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a deep, aching sense of betrayal. Sarah tried to focus on the mundane details of life, getting the kids ready for school, planning dinners, keeping up with the daily routine, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every small thing seemed to remind her of the betrayal, of the lies, of the shattered trust. She would see Jack walk through the door after work, his face filled with guilt, and for a moment, she would almost believe that things could go back to how they were. But then, the reality of it would hit her like a punch to the gut. Jack had been trying. He really had. He'd texted her more than once, called her, apologized, begged for forgiveness. But each time she saw his name pop up on her phone, her stomach turned. The words, "I'm sorry," had lost their meaning after everything. He didn't deserve forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever. It was Saturday afternoon when Sarah got the call. She was in the middle of folding laundry, the hum of the dryer in the background, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but there was a strange familiarity to it. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the name on the caller ID. It was from Emily. Part of her wanted to ignore it. What could Emily possibly have to say now? After their conversation in the cafe, Sarah had hoped to never speak to her again. But some inexplicable part of her wanted answers to questions she hadn't even realized she was asking. She took a deep breath and swiped to answer. "Hello?" Sarah said, trying to sound casual, but she could hear the tightness in her own voice. Hi, Sarah. Emily's voice came through, shaky but determined. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. Something important. Sarah's eyebrows furrowed. What could you possibly have to say that would make any of this better? She asked, her tone harsher than she intended. Emily paused for a moment, then spoke, her words coming quickly, as if she were in a hurry. It's about Jack. She stopped, letting out a breath. I didn't want to say this before, but I think you need to know. There's something you don't know, something Jack never told you. Sarah's stomach twisted. What do you mean? What could he have possibly kept from me? Emily took a deep breath. He's not just lying to you about me. There's more. Jack, he's been hiding something much bigger from you. And I think it's time you knew the truth. Sarah's pulse quickened. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice rising. I can't explain it all right now, Emily said, her voice strained. But he's involved in something illegal, something that could ruin everything for both of you. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She was silent for a moment, trying to process what Emily had just said. Was this some kind of twisted game? Or was Emily trying to make herself look better by digging up more dirt on Jack? But the urgency in Emily's voice rang true. There was something there, something deeper than just infidelity, something that didn't make sense. Why are you telling me this? Sarah finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. Because I don't want you to be blindsided, Emily replied softly. You deserve to know what you're really dealing with. I don't want you to stay with him, thinking you have all the facts when you don't. The line went silent for a long moment. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She had been betrayed by Jack in the worst way imaginable, but now Emily was telling her that there was something even darker lurking beneath the surface. What exactly is he involved in? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Emily hesitated again. I'm not sure of all the details, but it's bad, Sarah. Really bad. I overheard him talking about it with someone a few weeks ago. It's some kind of business deal, something involving money laundering or something illegal. And I think he's in deep. Sarah's mind raced, her thoughts spinning faster than she could process them. Money laundering? Was Jack really involved in something like that? She had no idea. How do you know all of this? Sarah asked, her tone skeptical. I overheard him talking to someone on the phone, and then there was a meeting at his office a few days ago. I don't know all the details, but I know that it's bad. He's lying to you about more than just us. Emily's voice faltered. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted any of this to happen. A rush of emotions hit Sarah all at once, fear, anger, confusion. She had already been shattered by Jack's infidelity, but this was something she hadn't even imagined. How could she have been so blind? How could Jack have kept something this huge from her? Why should I believe you? Sarah asked, her voice shaky but determined. Emily's voice softened. Because I think you deserve the truth, no matter how painful it is. I don't want to be a part of his lies anymore. I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. The line went dead silent, and Sarah was left standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. The world she thought she knew, her marriage, her life, was crumbling around her, piece by piece. Jack's betrayal wasn't just about Emily anymore. It wasn't even just about his lies. He was involved in something far darker, something that could destroy everything. Sarah sank down onto the couch, her hands shaking as she gripped the phone. She had never been more unsure of anything in her life. What should she do? How could she even begin to process all of this? She needed answers, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the truth was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following days were an emotional minefield for Sarah. Every step she took felt like walking on fragile ground, unsure of what would break beneath her. Her mind replayed Emily's words over and over, the image of Jack sitting in their living room, pretending everything was normal, while this web of lies and deceit spiraled out of control in the background. She couldn't focus on anything, her work, the kids, even the mundane tasks like grocery shopping. Everything seemed clouded by a heavy fog of uncertainty. How long had Jack been keeping this from her? The lies, the affairs, and now this illegal activity? She felt as if the ground beneath her feet had cracked wide open, and she was teetering on the edge, struggling to find something solid to cling to. That Saturday afternoon, Sarah did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out to her sister, Kelly. It wasn't that they weren't close. It was just that, over time, life had pulled them in different directions. But right now, Sarah needed someone she could trust completely. She needed someone who would listen, without judgment, without trying to fix everything. She needed her sister's calm, rational perspective. Kelly picked up on the third ring, her voice warm but laced with concern. "Sarah? Hey, are you okay? You sound off." "I'm not okay," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "Kelly, I don't know what to do. Jack's been hiding something from me." "Something worse than I ever imagined." Kelly's voice immediately shifted to concern. "What do you mean? What's going on?" For the next few minutes, Sarah laid it all out, the affair, the lies, and now this new revelation from Emily. By the time she finished, she could hear Kelly's soft breaths on the other end of the line, as if she too was trying to process the weight of it all. "That's a lot," Kelly finally said, her voice soft. "Are you sure about everything? I mean, are you sure Jack's involved in this illegal stuff?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her tone breaking slightly. "But Emily, she sounded so sincere. I don't think she's lying. She said she overheard him talking about it, some deal involving money laundering." "That's huge, Sarah," Kelly said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You have to be careful. This isn't just about an affair anymore. This could get really complicated." "I know," Sarah replied, her voice strained. "I feel like I'm drowning in all of this. I don't know how to handle it, what to do next. It's like I don't even know who he is anymore." Kelly was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "Listen, I don't know what's going on with Jack, but you need to find out for sure. You can't make any decisions without all the facts. Do you want me to come over? We can figure this out together." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. She had always been the strong one in the family, the one who kept everything together. But right now, she felt like a complete mess, shattered into 1,000 pieces. "No, Kelly," she said, her voice steadying. "I need to do this on my own. But I'll keep you updated. I don't even know where to start." "I understand," Kelly replied gently. "Just don't do anything rash. Take your time, okay? We'll get through this." They said their goodbyes and Sarah hung up, sitting in the silence that followed. She could hear the ticking of the clock in the background, but it felt like time had stopped. She couldn't do this alone. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in her hand. She had been thinking about Emily's words, trying to decide if she should confront Jack about the money laundering. The thought of him lying to her for so long, not just about the affair, but about something far more dangerous, made her feel sick. She stood up, pacing back and forth. The house felt empty, even though Jack was in the next room, sitting on the couch, probably watching TV or pretending everything was normal. He didn't know that she was about to make a choice that would change everything. Sarah couldn't keep pretending she didn't know. She couldn't let Jack continue to live in this world of lies. She needed answers. Without thinking any longer, Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed Jack's number. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, babe. What's up?" His voice was casual, like nothing had changed. "I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice cold. "Right now." There was a pause on the other end. Then Jack spoke, his tone cautious. "Okay, sure. I'll be right there." She hung up without saying another word. A few minutes later, Jack walked into the kitchen, his face unreadable. Sarah could see the nervousness in his eyes, the way his hands fidgeted with his phone. He knew something was off. "What's going on?" Jack asked, trying to sound casual. "I know what you've been doing," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "I know about Emily. I know about everything." Jack's face drained of color, and he took a step back. "Sarah, No," she cut him off, her voice rising now. "I don't want to hear it. I know about the affair. I know about the lies. And I know about whatever it is you're involved in. The illegal stuff. I'm not stupid, Jack. I know what's going on." Jack's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing as if he were searching for the right words. But there were no right words. Not anymore. "Sarah, please," Jack said, his voice desperate. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I was going to tell you. I swear I was." "Don't lie to me," Sarah shot back, her anger flaring. "You were going to keep hiding this from me, weren't you? You thought you could keep it all under wraps and I'd never find out." "No, that's not it at all," Jack said, stepping closer to her. "It's complicated. I didn't want to drag you into this. But now it's too late, isn't it?" "Too late?" "Too late." Sarah's voice cracked as she fought back tears. "You've been lying to me for months, Jack. I've been sitting here, believing you, trusting you, and you've been deceiving me the entire time. Not just with Emily, but with something that could ruin both of us. How could you do this?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with how to explain himself. "I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I swear. It got out of hand. Things got messy." "Messy?" Sarah repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "You've ruined everything, Jack. I don't even know who you are anymore." She could feel the tears coming, but she pushed them back, trying to hold onto the last shred of control she had. This was it. The breaking point. The moment everything fell apart. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can live like this." Jack's face twisted with regret, but Sarah couldn't find it in herself to care. He had lost her trust. He had lost her respect. And now he was losing her completely. The house felt colder now, the silence between them heavier than ever. Sarah had made up her mind. This was the end. The house felt suffocating, the walls closing in around Sarah as she stood across from Jack in the kitchen, her heart hammering in her chest. The tension between them was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Jack was standing there, looking lost, his usually confident demeanor shattered, replaced by the raw vulnerability that had never been present before. But it was too late. She had seen the man he really was, and the trust she had placed in him was gone, replaced by a cold and bitter reality. Jack opened his mouth to speak again, but Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "I don't want to hear it. Not right now, Jack." Her voice was firm, the steady pulse of anger and hurt behind every word. He flinched, but she didn't care. The raw pain she felt had clouded her thoughts, but it had also given her clarity. She knew she couldn't keep living in this lie any longer. She had spent too many sleepless nights wondering who Jack truly was, wondering if she could ever trust him again. Now she had the truth, and it was uglier than anything she had ever imagined. "Sarah, please," Jack said, his voice shaking with desperation. "I made a mistake. I made a huge mistake, and I don't know how to fix it, but I swear to you, I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you." Sarah's heart clenched at the words, but she fought to keep her composure. "You love me," she repeated, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "You love me, Jack, but you've been lying to me for months. You've been betraying me, and now you're involved in something illegal. You don't get to say that anymore." His face twisted in pain, but there was something else in his eyes, something she couldn't ignore. Fear. He was scared, and for the first time, Sarah realized just how far down the rabbit hole he had gone. The walls were crumbling around him, and he was struggling to keep it all together. But that didn't change the fact that he had destroyed everything she had worked for. He had destroyed their marriage, their family, their trust. I don't know how to fix this, Jack said, his voice pleading. But I'm asking you, please don't leave. We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of everything wash over her. The love they had once shared, the life they had built, it all seemed so distant now. It was hard to remember a time when they were happy, when they could trust each other without question. But that was before Emily. Before the lies. Before the secrets. She shook her head slowly. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jack. I really don't. The words felt like they were tearing her apart, but there was no other way to say it. She couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after everything. I'll prove it to you, Jack said, stepping forward, his hand reaching out toward her. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut ties with anyone connected to this illegal business. I'll be open about everything. Just, please don't leave me. Sarah looked at him, her chest tight. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But how could she? How could she trust someone who had been hiding this life from her for so long? Someone who had lied to her face, someone who had betrayed her in ways she couldn't even begin to comprehend? You're asking me to forgive you. But you haven't given me anything to forgive yet. I don't even know where to begin, she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. I thought I knew you, Jack. But now, I don't even know who you are anymore. Jack's face crumpled with sorrow, and for a moment, Sarah saw the man he used to be, the man she had once loved, the man she had trusted. But that man was gone, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. It was as if the man she had spent years with had been hiding behind a mask the whole time. And now, with everything exposed, she was left standing in the ruins of what they had built. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything. Sarah stood motionless, her mind racing. The world felt upside down, and for the first time, she felt completely lost. What was the right choice? Was there even a right choice? Could she forgive him? Could she forgive herself for staying with him for so long, blind to the lies? Jack, I don't know what to do, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I feel like I'm drowning in this. Jack reached out to touch her arm, but she pulled away before his hand could make contact. The touch of his hand. Once a comfort, once a symbol of their love, felt foreign now, cold. Please don't shut me out, he said, his voice barely audible. I'm not shutting you out, Sarah replied, her voice soft but firm. I'm trying to protect myself. I need to think. I need time. Jack's face fell, and for a moment, he looked like a lost child. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. Then prove it, Sarah replied, her voice cracking. Prove that you're not the man I thought you were. But I can't make this decision now. Not like this. Jack nodded, tears welling in his eyes. He knew the truth. Words alone couldn't fix this. He had to show her. But would it be enough? Could he make things right? The silence between them was deafening as Sarah walked away, leaving Jack standing there, unsure of what would come next. Her heart ached, but she knew she had to take a step back. She couldn't keep living in the whirlwind of lies, in the uncertainty of it all. She needed space. Time to breathe. Time to decide what her future could look like without Jack in it. The thought of that future terrified her more than anything. She had spent years building a life with him. A family. A home. Could she really walk away from it all? Could she really walk away from the man she had once loved? The questions lingered, unanswered. And the weight of those questions crushed her chest. The following days passed in a haze, each one feeling like an eternity, stretching out before Sarah, blurred by the overwhelming weight of uncertainty. The air in the house was thick with unspoken words and unfinished conversations. Jack had given her space, a rare and unusual quietness between them, but it felt more like a void than peace. He was trying to prove something, she knew that much. He was trying to show her that he could change, that he could be the man she had once believed in. But could he really? She had spent hours staring out the window, watching the world go by without her. The neighborhood was the same, people walking their dogs, kids riding their bikes, the same old houses and the same old routines. Life outside her window seemed to carry on as if nothing had changed, but Sarah knew that everything inside her house had been shattered. Her thoughts were consumed with the reality of Jack's betrayal. How deep did the lies run? Was it just the affair and this money laundering scheme, or were there more layers, more hidden truths that she hadn't uncovered yet? She thought about Emily's warning and the way the pieces didn't seem to fit. There was something off about all of it, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. But she had made a decision. She couldn't wait around, paralyzed by fear and doubt anymore. She needed to take control of her life again. And the only way to do that was to face the truth, no matter how ugly or difficult it was. That afternoon, Sarah found herself standing in the driveway of the local police station. The building was nondescript, hidden among the other government buildings, and yet it felt like an enormous step toward the unknown. She had come here for a reason, for answers. Emily's warning had struck a chord, and she knew that if she was going to face the man she had spent years with, she needed to be armed with the truth. She needed to know exactly what she was dealing with. Her hand trembled slightly as she pushed open the door to the station and made her way toward the front desk. The officer behind the counter looked up as she approached, a bored expression on his face. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice flat. Sarah took a deep breath and steadied herself. "I need to speak to someone about a possible criminal activity. It's about my husband, Jack Lawson." The officer's eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he motioned for her to take a seat. She did so, her heart racing in her chest. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but this felt like a moment of no return. It was time to confront the truth, to pull back the veil that had been hiding Jack's dark side. Minutes later, a detective came to meet her. His name was Detective Hernandez, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes. He led Sarah into a small, quiet room at the back of the station. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Lawson," he said. "I understand you have concerns about your husband. Please, tell me what's going on." Sarah took a deep breath and began recounting everything she knew: Jack's affair with Emily, the rumors of money laundering, the strange phone calls she had overheard. She told the detective everything, leaving out nothing, even the smallest details that had been gnawing at her since she first learned the truth. Her voice cracked a few times as she spoke, but she forced herself to continue. She couldn't back down now. When she finished, Detective Hernandez sat quietly for a moment, his fingers tapping gently against the table. He studied her, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "Mrs. Lawson, I can't give you specifics about your husband's involvement in any criminal activity, but based on what you've told me, I can tell you that we are aware of individuals in his circle. We've been investigating them for some time, and it appears that your husband may be entangled in something much larger than you realize." The words hit Sarah like a blow to the chest. She had known that Jack was involved in something dangerous, but hearing it from a professional, the reality of it, made her stomach churn. She had been living in a bubble of denial, convincing herself that she could somehow fix everything. But now she understood. This wasn't just a matter of a cheating husband. This was much bigger, much darker than anything she had imagined. "How serious is it?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's serious, Mrs. Lawson," Hernandez said, his voice solemn. "We're talking about money laundering, possible connections to organized crime. Your husband might not be as innocent as he's led you to believe. And if he's involved in any of this, it could mean serious consequences." Sarah felt as though the floor had fallen out from beneath her. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. The man she had loved, the father of her children, had been living a double life. He had been hiding a criminal world from her, and she hadn't even known. She thought she had been aware of everything, but the truth was far worse than she could have imagined. "Is he going to be arrested?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We are still gathering evidence, but yes, it's possible," Hernandez replied, his tone steady. "It could take some time, but it looks like he may have been involved in some very serious activity. If you feel threatened, or if you have any other information that might help us, I strongly recommend you take precautions. It's not just your marriage that's at risk now. His actions could endanger you and your family as well." Sarah nodded, though her mind was swirling with the enormity of it all. The weight of the detective's words was suffocating. Jack wasn't just a man who had made mistakes. He was a man who had willingly chosen a dangerous path, a path that could destroy everything they had. The future she had planned for herself and her children had been shattered in an instant. "Thank you for your time, Detective," Sarah said, her voice tight. She stood up, feeling a strange mix of numbness and disbelief. I need to go." Hernandez gave her a sympathetic look as she left the room, his words echoing in her ears. "It's not just your marriage at risk now." As Sarah walked out of the station, her legs shaky beneath her, she realized something. She had been living in a bubble, protecting herself from the truth because facing it seemed unbearable. But now she couldn't hide from it anymore. She had seen the dark side of Jack, and there was no turning back. Sarah sat alone in the darkened living room, the weight of the detective's words pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. She had barely managed to drive home from the police station, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing in 1,000 directions. Her world had been turned upside down in the span of just a few hours, and now she had to decide what to do with the pieces. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the photo on the mantel, the one of her, Jack, and the kids at the beach last summer. They all looked so happy, so carefree. It was hard to reconcile that image with the man she had just learned about. The man involved in illegal dealings. The man who had lied to her every day for months, maybe even years. The man who had torn apart everything they had built together. She thought about the conversation with Jack earlier in the week. The desperate plea in his voice as he begged her not to leave, how he promised to change, to prove himself to her. He had said he loved her. But now, those words seemed like empty promises, the lies of a man who didn't even know how deep his own deception had gone. Sarah felt a deep sense of betrayal not just for the affair, but for the way Jack had spun a web of lies so intricate that it had ensnared her, her family, her entire life. What was worse, she had ignored the warning signs, turned a blind eye to the little things that didn't quite add up. And now, there was no going back. The truth was out, and there was no way to erase it. She could hear the kids playing upstairs, their laughter a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside her. How was she supposed to tell them that their father, who they adored, who they trusted, was not the man they thought he was? How was she supposed to explain this? For a moment, she thought about packing up and leaving, taking the kids and disappearing. She could run away, start over somewhere new. But she knew that wasn't the answer. No matter where she went, the truth would still follow her. The only way out of this, the only way to truly heal, was to face it head-on. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping her out of her thoughts. She picked it up and saw a message from Emily. "Sarah, I know things are tough right now, but I want you to know I'm here for you. If you need to talk or anything, I'm just a phone call away." Sarah felt a rush of anger and confusion flood through her. Emily had warned her about Jack's involvement in the illegal business, but that didn't change the fact that she had been Jack's mistress. She was part of the reason everything had spiraled out of control. And now, here she was, offering support as if she hadn't played a huge part in the destruction of Sarah's life. But the truth was, Emily was right about one thing. She was the one who had cracked open the door to the truth, and for that, Sarah couldn't completely dismiss her. She needed answers. She needed to know everything. Without thinking, Sarah typed a reply. "We need to talk. I need to know everything about Jack. About what you two were involved in. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Part of her felt like a fool for trusting Emily even a little, but the other part of her, the part that was desperate for clarity, for closure, couldn't ignore the fact that Emily knew things she didn't. As the evening dragged on, Sarah found herself lying in bed, wide awake, her thoughts running in circles. What was she going to do? How could she stay in a marriage with a man who had been so dishonest? But then, there was the other side of her, the side that had loved Jack with everything she had. The side that remembered their first date, their wedding day, the birth of their children. That side still ached at the thought of losing him completely. Was it possible to love someone so deeply and still want to walk away from them? Could she ever forgive him? The thought of forgiveness felt impossible, but she had learned, over the years, that people were capable of incredible change. Maybe Jack could change too. But she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to wait around for him to prove it. She wasn't sure she could risk her heart again after everything he had done. As the clock ticked on, Sarah finally fell into a restless sleep, the shadows of doubt clouding her dreams. When morning came, she got up early, her mind still tangled in confusion. She had to talk to Emily, had to understand exactly how deep Jack's involvement went. She needed to know everything before making a decision about what to do next. When she walked into the cafe the next day, she was met by Emily, who was already sitting at a table near the window. Emily looked up when Sarah walked in, her face a mixture of guilt and sympathy. She didn't look like the woman Sarah had once seen as a threat. Now, she just looked tired, worn down by the weight of everything. Sarah sat down without saying a word, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't want to waste time on pleasantries. "I'm here because I need to know the truth," Emily, Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "I need to understand what you and Jack were involved in." "Everything." Emily swallowed hard, glancing around the cafe nervously as if afraid someone might overhear. She looked as though she were debating whether or not to tell Sarah everything. But in the end, she sighed deeply and nodded. "He didn't want you to know, Sarah," Emily began, her voice steady but tinged with regret. "He kept you in the dark for a reason. He wasn't deep. Really deep. The money laundering, the connections to organized crime, all of it. I didn't know the full extent until after we got involved. Jack promised me that it was just a way to make quick money, that no one would get hurt, but it wasn't that simple. He was being pulled further and further into something dangerous, and I couldn't get him out. He didn't want out. He didn't want to let go of the power, the money." Emily paused for a moment, her eyes searching Sarah's face for a reaction. "I never meant for any of this to happen. But Jack, he got lost in it. In the lies, in the money. And I got lost too." Sarah sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Emily's words. This was worse than she had imagined. Jack had been so deep into it that he couldn't get out, and now his entire world was on the brink of collapse. And it wasn't just his world, it was hers too. "I didn't want to hurt you, Sarah," Emily continued, her voice softening. "I didn't know how to get out of it. But when I saw how much you loved him, how much you trusted him, I realized just how much damage we had done." Sarah closed her eyes, the pain of betrayal rising again in her chest. She had to admit it, she had been living in a fantasy. The man she thought she knew, the man she thought she loved, had been living a double life. And now, there was no going back. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah finally asked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" Emily's face twisted in guilt. "I was scared, Sarah. I was scared of what would happen if you knew. Jack didn't want anyone to know. And I didn't want to lose him. But I see now that I've only made everything worse. I'm sorry." The apology felt hollow, but it was all Emily could offer. Sarah didn't know what to do with it. She didn't know what to do with anything anymore. The decision wasn't coming easily for Sarah. Every moment of every day felt like she was holding her breath, waiting for something, anything, to make sense again. The truth was out, and now she had to figure out what to do with it. Her marriage was in tatters. Her trust had been shattered. And as much as she hated to admit it, there was no going back to the way things were. She sat on the edge of her bed, her mind heavy with all the choices ahead of her. Jack had begged her to stay, promised to change, to make things right. But how could she believe him after everything? After the affair. After the lies. After finding out that he was neck-deep in a criminal underworld she had never even suspected. In the silence of her bedroom, Sarah replayed every conversation she had had with Jack over the past few weeks. She thought about his apologetic words, the way he seemed so desperate, so determined to make amends. But beneath it all, she wondered if that was just another version of the man who had deceived her for so long. Emily's words echoed in her mind too, about Jack being pulled deeper into the criminal world, about the lies they had both been living. But Sarah couldn't help but wonder, had Emily been telling her the truth? Had she been manipulated just as much as Sarah had been? Or was Emily's own guilt simply a reflection of the choices she had made in her affair with Jack? The truth was, Sarah didn't know who to trust anymore. She wasn't sure if she could trust Jack, or even herself. Was she willing to throw away everything, the years of love, the shared history, for the sake of her pride, or for the safety and security of her family? Her phone buzzed again, pulling her out of her spiraling thoughts. It was a message from Jack. "We need to talk. Please, Sarah. I can't lose you. You have to know how sorry I am for everything." She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. He always had a way of getting under her skin. The words sounded sincere, but did they mean anything? Or was it just Jack trying to manipulate her one more time, using the same charm and remorse that had worked for him in the past? For the 1000th time, Sarah asked herself the same question. Could she forgive him? Could she rebuild this relationship, this life, knowing the man she had been married to for so long had been hiding something so dark? She stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of her emotions. She loved him. That much was undeniable. But love couldn't fix everything, could it? The sound of the kids' laughter drifted up from downstairs, pulling her back into the present. They were too young to understand the full weight of what was happening, but Sarah knew it wouldn't be long before they started asking questions. They had already noticed that something was wrong between her and Jack. It was in the air, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the silence that hung heavy over the dinner table. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. Jack had been her everything, her husband, her partner, the father of her children. But now he was a stranger. A man she didn't know. And even if she tried to forgive him, there was no guarantee that things would ever go back to the way they were. The cracks were already too deep. Sarah thought about the conversations she'd had with her closest friends over the past few weeks. Some of them were adamant that she should leave Jack. He had broken her trust beyond repair, and no apology could fix that. Others said she should fight for her marriage, that she needed to try for the sake of their family, for the sake of their children. But neither of those options felt right. Neither seemed to honor what she needed most: clarity. A path forward that wasn't clouded by fear, guilt, or anger. And that was when she realized she had to make a choice that was for her. A choice that wasn't influenced by what anyone else thought, a choice that was about reclaiming herself, reclaiming her life. She couldn't live in the shadow of Jack's mistakes any longer. With that thought, she pulled her phone from her pocket and typed a message to him. "I'll meet you. But we need to talk about everything, Jack. No more lies." It felt like the first step in a direction she wasn't sure she was ready for. But it was the only step she could take. She had to know the full truth. She had to face it all. Only then could she decide what to do next. The air felt thick as she walked in, the noise of clinking cups and soft conversations surrounding her like a distant hum. Jack was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking like the man she used to love, vulnerable, sincere, yet unmistakably broken. He stood as she approached, his eyes pleading. Sarah, thank you for coming, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah sat down across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't say anything at first, just studied him, trying to reconcile the man sitting before her with the stranger she had learned about in the last few days. He seemed different, like a man who knew the weight of everything he had done. But was it genuine? Or was it just another act? Jack cleared his throat. I know you've heard a lot, and I know you probably think I'm a monster. But I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you, Sarah. I never wanted to lose you. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Then why did you lie to me? Why didn't you tell me the truth about what you were involved in? Jack's face crumpled, and he looked away for a moment. Because I didn't think I could get out of it. It wasn't just about me anymore, Sarah. It was about everything: money, power, people I couldn't say no to. But I should have told you. I should have trusted you enough to let you in. Sarah shook her head, the bitterness rising in her chest. And the affair, Jack? You think that was just some mistake? You think that was just a symptom of your problems? You betrayed me, and you betrayed our family. Do you even understand the depth of that? I do now, Jack whispered, his eyes welling with tears. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could take it all back, I would. But I can't. His voice cracked, and for a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of the man she had once known. But then the reality of everything hit her once more. He couldn't undo the past. He couldn't undo the lies, the affair, the deception. I don't know if I can forgive you, Jack, Sarah said softly, her heart breaking. I don't know if I can trust you again. Jack's eyes widened with panic. Please, don't say that. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, just give me a chance. Let me prove I can change. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man sitting across from her wasn't just a stranger who had broken her heart. But how could she, after everything? She opened her eyes and met his gaze. You had your chance, Jack. And now I have to decide what's best for me, for our kids, for my future. Her heart was shattered, but Sarah knew one thing for certain. It was time to move forward, even if that meant walking away from the man she once thought she knew. The days that followed the meeting with Jack were some of the hardest Sarah had ever faced. The silence at home was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft whisper of wind outside felt like a reminder that her life, the one she thought was stable and whole, had come undone. She was still processing everything, still trying to understand what it meant to let go of the man she had once believed she would grow old with. But despite the ache, Sarah knew one thing: she couldn't go back. No matter how much she loved Jack, no matter how many memories they shared, she had to move forward. It wasn't just for her own peace of mind, it was for the sake of their children. She couldn't raise them in a house built on lies, on the foundation of broken trust. The first step was the hardest: telling the kids. They had been asking questions since the tension began to settle like a thick fog over their home. Sarah had hoped to shelter them from the worst of it, but the time had come when they needed to know, in an age-appropriate way, what was happening. The youngest, Mia, had noticed her father's absence more and more. The oldest, Luke, had sensed the growing distance between his parents, and the silent conversations between them only raised more curiosity. That evening, after dinner, Sarah sat them down in the living room. It was a quiet moment, with the soft glow of the table lamp casting a warm, familiar light over their faces. They were all together, and Sarah could almost pretend things were normal almost. "Mom, what's wrong with Dad?" Luke asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart heavy with the weight of her own words. She had practiced what she would say, had run through 100 different scenarios in her mind, but nothing could prepare her for this moment. "Luke," she began gently, meeting his gaze, "your dad has made some choices that are hurtful and wrong. Choices that have hurt me, and that's why we're not talking right now. But I want you both to know that I love you, and no matter what happens, nothing will ever change that. Mia, who was too young to understand the full picture, tugged at her sleeve. Is Dad coming back? The question stung, but Sarah forced a smile. I don't know, sweetie. Things are complicated, and we don't know what the future holds, but what I do know is that you and Luke are my world. And we're going to be okay. She could see the confusion on their faces, the unanswered questions swirling in their young minds. But they didn't press. They didn't need to. It was clear that they didn't understand the full scope of what had happened, and Sarah wasn't sure she could explain it to them, not just yet. After they went to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room again, the weight of the conversation still heavy on her chest. She had done what she could, had told them enough without going into details that would only hurt them more. It was a small victory, but it didn't feel like one. The reality of her new life was still raw, still painful. She thought of Jack and the empty space he left behind. His absence in the house was palpable, a physical void that Sarah couldn't fill. He hadn't come home since their conversation at the cafe, and though part of her had expected him to return, to beg her for another chance, she had finally accepted that he was gone for good. Or at least, the man he had been was gone. But as Sarah sat there, alone with her thoughts, something shifted inside her. The pain was still there, raw and unrelenting, but she also realized something important. She didn't need Jack to feel whole. She didn't need him to define her. She had built her life with him, but that life had always been hers too. She had always been capable of standing on her own, of finding joy and strength in herself, in her children, in her friends. And with that realization came the second hardest step, letting go of the hope that she could fix everything. Letting go of the hope that Jack could change, that they could go back to the way things were. There was no going back, not to the happy couple they once were, not to the illusions they had both clung to. They had changed, and the world around them had changed too. The weeks that followed were filled with small moments of progress, of healing. Sarah spent time rediscovering herself. She picked up old hobbies she had abandoned over the years. Painting, reading, spending quiet moments in the garden. She reconnected with friends who had been there all along, people who had supported her even when she had kept her distance. She found comfort in these small acts of reclaiming her life. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself becoming more and more at peace with her decision. There were still hard moments, of course, moments when she found herself thinking about Jack, about the family they had once been. But those thoughts grew quieter over time, replaced by the sound of her own voice, her own thoughts, her own needs. One day, as Sarah was finishing up a meeting at work, she got a text from Emily. It was brief, a simple check-in. How are you doing? I'm thinking of you. Sarah stared at the message for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Emily had been a part of her life for so long, but their relationship was still complicated. She had betrayed Sarah's trust, and the hurt was still there, raw and lingering. But Sarah knew something important. She didn't have to forgive Emily overnight. Forgiveness, after all, wasn't about excusing what had happened. It was about releasing the hold it had on her heart. And right now, she wasn't ready to do that. But she would. In time. She texted back, I'm okay. Slowly but surely. Thank you for checking in. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. A step toward finding peace, toward putting the pieces of her life back together. A few months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen, her kids laughing and playing nearby, the sunlight streaming through the windows. She felt a sense of calm, of quiet strength that had taken time to cultivate, but was finally hers. The pain of the past was still there, like a scar that would always remain. But it no longer defined her. The phone rang, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen, Jack. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Sarah. Jack's voice came through, rough and uncertain. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to check in on you. On the kids. Her chest tightened, but she took a deep breath. We're doing fine, Jack. The kids are doing well. They're happy. Are you? He asked softly. Sarah paused, her heart aching with the question. "I'm finding my way," she replied. "And I think that's enough for me right now." Jack was silent for a moment, and Sarah could feel the weight of the conversation between them. She had loved him once. She always would, in some small way. But her life had changed. She had changed. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice full of regret. "I know I can't take back what I did. But I hope someday you can forgive me." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Jack," she said honestly, "but I've learned that I don't need to. I'm okay. And so are the kids." There was another long silence before Jack spoke again. "I'm glad. Truly. I hope you find the happiness you deserve." Sarah smiled softly, feeling the finality of it all settle in her chest. "Thank you." As she hung up the phone, she realized that this was the end. The end of the story she had thought would last forever. But also the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she could define her own happiness on her own terms. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that the future held something better. The hardest part is not knowing where the road leads. The hardest part is taking the first step toward it, even when you can't see the end. For Sarah, the road ahead was unknown, but it was hers to travel. And that was enough. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?